Out of all the Pokemon considered by fans to be the most disturbing, one of the biggest contenders is Darkrai. I can honestly see why. The design is reminiscent of a demon or wraith, its actions in the anime are borderline nightmare fuel, and it has the power to cause eternal nightmares in whoever it chooses, which we see when Darkrai decides to do this to a child in Diamond and Pearl. However, in my opinion, Darkrai is at its worst in the spin-off titles, specifically Pokemon Ranger Shadow's Valmir. In this game, Darkrai serves as the final boss, and is possibly the most enjoyable final boss in the 3 Ranger games, and it doesn't have an annoying gimmick like Entei from the original and Mewtwo from Guardian Signs. Darkrai actually has a lot of build-up for a Pokemon boss, and said build-up only helps to secure its status as the being of nightmares. Its dormant form was a giant black crystal sealed under the highlands of the Almere region, and it gave off an aura of darkness so strong that it was able to corrupt the mind of the game's main villain, Blake Hall, while he was a young man. The villain discovered that shards from this crystal could then be used to control Pokemon, and used them to build brainwashing machines in order to cause chaos. Fast forward to the climax, and the villain uses the Dark Crystal itself to brainwash all of Almere's Pokemon in order to raise an army to conquer the world. However, when he tries to use Darkrai to attack the player, Darkrai shows just how he got his title as the Nightmare Pokemon by immediately breaking free of his control and sending Blake Hall and his associate to a world of darkness. How does Darkrai do this? By creating a shadowy aura on the ground which then pulls them closer and closer towards Darkrai. Once they're close enough, they're then pulled down towards something. To make matters worse, it seems his victims are still conscious in whatever hell Darkrai sent them to, and Darkrai then tries to do the same to the player. The fragmented, terrified speech coming from the characters trapped in Darkrai's realm and frightened expressions and movements of the player character do nothing to help matters either. Finally, when you try to capture Darkrai, it is completely impossible to capture it for the first part of the battle, as no amount of loops will increase its friendship gauge. If you look close enough, you'll notice that Darkrai outright rejects the energy from the Styler, meaning that this particular Darkrai is so evil and so corrupt that the concepts of trust and friendship are completely alien to it. All it understands is to corrupt, control, enslave, and destroy. Remember how I said that in the second set of Mystery Dungeon games, the player character hails from a bad future? This time, we're actually going to take a little closer look at just how messed up this future world is. This place is honestly one of the most depressing locations in the Pokemon series, and that's saying something given how some of the places we've seen are freaking graveyards. The entire world has been completely ravaged by the destruction of time itself. Remember that one Doctor Who episode where the fabric of time gets unraveled, causing all of history to happen at the same time? This is basically the inverse of that. Instead of time having no meaning, there is literally zero passage of time at all. The world is covered in eternal night, all plant life has shriveled and died, massive fissures have opened up in the ground, and the fragments of the land are forever suspended in the air. You get to see a lot of this when you traverse the 2 dungeons set in this future. To make matters worse, Dialga, the deity of time, hasn't taken too well to the destruction of its sphere and control, having gone completely off the deep end and reverted back to nothing more than a mindless beast. As to the inhabitants of this world, at least those that are still alive, considering how an event as cataclysmic as this is bound to have a few 100,000 casualties in the least, aside from those like Grovyle who are trying to reset the timeline, a la Sonic 06, some are completely overrun with the despair that they literally no longer care about what happens to them. Some, like Dialga, have reverted to a primal state. Some, like Dialga, serve in dust and have lost so much hope they decide to serve primal Dialga and worship it as some form of god. And others, like the Spiritomb I mentioned a few entries ago, have gone completely insane, driven mad by their own despair and the grim reality of the world they live in. To make matters worse, due to the flow of time no longer existing, it can be theorized that anything from this future will remain immortal and ageless as long as they remain in said future, only properly aging when they return to the past where the flow of time is normal. Which begs the question of just how old are the inhabitants of that future? How long have they lived in this realm of eternal darkness, never aging and never dying? Damn, now that is dark. Well, what do you know? Another ghost type. I never would have seen that one coming. Alright, I've been putting this one off for a while, so here it is at last. The original Pokemon ghost, Gengar. Admittedly, Gengar has lost some of its creepy factors as years go on due to improved graphics of each new generation. In fact, I also think its model in the 3DS games looks kind of silly. But back in the earlier generations, its sprite looked downright terrifying. Just look at that face! The wide staring eyes and permanent slasher smile of large, perfect white teeth stand out from its pitch-black body, making them seem to almost pop out of the screen. And its eyes seem to peer into your very soul. I don't know about you, but if I saw this thing in a dark alleyway, I'd shit a ton of bricks and run like goddamn Sonic in the opposite direction. The fact that they were usually found in places like the previously mentioned Pokemon Tower doesn't really help matters, as while exploring these places you'll most likely be on edge due to the ambience and the fact that wild Pokemon can and will attack at a moment's notice. You'll be carefully tiptoeing around the shadows and all of a sudden this nightmare-inducing demon spawn leaps out of the shadows and attacks you. In the side games, Gengar is possibly even worse. As in the Pokemon Ranger games, their sprite makes uncanny jerking motions, they appear to laugh constantly when idle, and they have a nasty habit of teleporting behind you to make a sneak attack when your guard's down. Then when you try to catch one, its attacking sprite looks even worse as its eyes bug out of its head while it sticks out its tongue to launch whatever dark energy attack it can think of using in your general direction. That's not even going into Gengar's Mystery Dungeon appearance. While its appearance in the first set of Mystery Dungeon games is outright disturbing, it's no less dark than what we've seen before. In this game, one particular Gengar serves one of the villains, and his actions are downright disgusting. When it's revealed that an evil Pokemon trainer who apparently left their loyal Pokemon partner to die and was turned into a Pokemon as punishment, Gengar convinces the townsfolk that the player was that trainer, turning all rescue teams against the player and their partner, and then forces them out of their home, forcing them to escape to the wilderness. It's later revealed that the slimy bastard was only doing this to save his own skin, as he was that trainer, not the player, and he later has the nerve to come and ask you for help in the post-game story. Safe to say, I'm not particularly fond of that guy. Has anyone ever really stopped to think about just what the plans of the various villainous teams in the Pokemon series actually mean, and just how twisted some of them are? One of the worst offenders in this category is the main villain of the Sinnoh games, Cyrus. Oh boy, how many people did I piss off with that statement? Please just hear me out on this. Cyrus is possibly one of the most cold-hearted villains in the entire franchise. He cares little for his subordinates, even being prepared to sacrifice them if it will further his plans. He could care less about the people and Pokemon he hurts and steps on while carrying out his objectives. In fact, he'd gladly kill you if it'd stop you interfering with his plans. And he's a huge fan of overkill. Instead of using a boat to get to the center of Lake Valor, he decides to commission the development of a bomb and use the blast to forcibly drain the lake's water. That's just scratching the surface of the depths he's prepared to go to. He tortures the legendary Pokemon Uxie, Mesbrit, and Azelf to forcibly extract their power to create the Red Chain, an artifact that can control the legendary Pokemon Dialga and Palkia, and when said Pokemon breaks free of his control, he's prepared to leave the player to die at the hands of the deities of time and space while he escapes to save his own skin. So what exactly is Cyrus's plan? He has such a deep hatred of everything and everyone that he wishes to harness the powers of time and space by enslaving the respective Pokemon and use them to destroy the entire universe and rebuild it in his image, making them the ultimate ruler of everything in the process. This gets worse in Pokemon Platinum as he actually succeeds in summoning and gaining control of both Dialga and Palkia and is about to carry out the full extent of his plans if it weren't for the timely arrival of a certain other legendary that I'll talk about in a later entry. Pretty big step up from the last few games, isn't it? We started with basically the Pokemon Mafia, then we had the remnants of said Mafia trying to get revenge on the world, then we got eco-terrorists trying to create either more land or sea, we then went from that to neo-Nazis trying to reboot the universe itself. I get the feeling that the guys at Nintendo don't exactly understand the idea of subtlety all that well. So, the Strange House. En's Toy Room isn't the only creepy location in the Unova region, not by a long shot. Located just outside Lentimer's town and right next to Reversal Mountain, it looks like just an unassuming building from the outside. So, you'll go inside to find a creepy dilapidated house with the furniture rattling constantly as being moved by some unseen force. As you explore this place, you'll notice that the furniture is arranged in such a way that certain rooms and passages are blocked off. Almost as if there is something or someone that is trying to force you into travelling across a certain path through the building. As you explore the house, you'll come across a room filled with bookshelves on the lower floor. Should the player interact with these bookshelves, they get various trivia facts about certain Pokemon, mostly to do with Pokemon that have a connection with dreams, including the legendary Pokemon Cresselia and Darkrai. Upon leaving the room from the opposite end, you'll immediately notice that the unseen presence from before has moved around the furniture, blocking off the way out. Like it or not, you're in for the long run this time. No easy escape for you. This slightly unsettling process repeats for a few more times before you gain access to the house's upper floor, where the true horror of the strange house awaits you. When you start exploring the rooms on the top floor, you'll encounter the ghost of a little girl, which, if you remember, is the same one encountered on the Marvelous Bridge in the previous game. Except this time, instead of serving as a quick harmless jump scare, this time around, she spouts cryptic lines about being lost and alone in an endless sea of darkness and nightmares. Seems familiar to what happened in Shadows of Almia, doesn't it? Did the Darkrai decide to trap her into a nightmare so deep that she never woke up from it and actually died? This is quite likely, as once you go into the final room, you obtain a Luna Wing. Picking it up causes the girl to appear one last time, saying that she can no longer use the Luna Wing, and asks the player to return it to Cresselia. Does this mean that the girl's parents managed to get a hold of a Luna Wing, the one thing that can save a person from Darkrai's nightmares, but were too late to use it? Come to think of it, where are this girl's parents? Did Darkrai get them too? Or did something happen to them after their daughter's death? Did they simply move far away from the Unova region? Or did something else happen? Something a little more, shall we say, drastic. God damn, I made that a little bit too disturbing. Next entry, please. Cyrus isn't the only villain to have a plan involving destruction on a large scale. Another one shows up in the more recent entries in the Pokemon franchise. This villain is Lysander from Pokemon X and Y. While he may not be as twisted as Cyrus, his plan is arguably much more disturbing than Cyrus's aims by a good margin. Whereas Cyrus basically wanted to reboot reality for shits and giggles, Lysander is what we call a well-intentioned extremist. Lysander's main goal in Pokemon X and Y is to create a beautiful world. Doesn't sound all that bad at first, but then he reveals the full extent of his plan and just why he's doing this. He reveals that he's fed up of all the greed, envy, and hatred in the world, and he believes that Pokemon, while magnificent and intelligent, have only ever been used by humans and tools as weapons. His desire is then to harness the power of the legendary Pokemon and an ancient device used centuries earlier by a former king of the Kalos region, and to then use that power to completely eradicate Pokemon and drastically reduce the population of humans in order to force the people of the world to come together. Think about that for just a moment. This is a man whose faith in the world has been completely and utterly destroyed. A man that believes that the only way to fix the world is to essentially nuke the planet to kill off half the human population. So much so that he's not willing to even consider other solutions. Let's just put that into perspective. The total combined population of our Earth, and presumably the Pokemon world at the time of X and Y, is roughly 7.1 billion, which will round down to 7 billion. Therefore, in order to wipe out half the planet's population, we're looking at somewhere around 3.5 billion casualties. Should Lysander succeed in his plan to use that weapon, he will have committed the largest genocide in the history of mankind. What makes matters worse is that should you remove the fantasy element from this plan, I could honestly see something like this happen in real life. Think about it. How many people do you know that have claimed to have lost their faith in humanity? Do you know anyone that is so sick of injustice and hatred that they will aggressively respond at the first sight of it? Are you familiar with anyone who believes that racists, bullies, etc. don't deserve to live? What happens if they get their hands on something like this and basically decide that nuking the planet is the only way? Are you feeling uneasy yet? Paranoid? Or are you scared? Because deep down inside, when faced with this kind of choice, you, like Lysander, would have pushed that button. Going back to Kalos for a second, remember how Lysander found the ultimate weapon buried on the ground? We know that he didn't make it, and we know that there was a great war in the Kalos region a few hundred years prior to the event of the game. So, what exactly happened in that war that forced one side to build a weapon of ultimate power? It must have been pretty serious, right? The answer is actually something quite depressing, going so far that it probably crosses the border into disturbing. The story goes like this. During the Kalos War, many Pokemon were drafted into the war in order to fight and possibly make up the numbers. While this was going on, the King of Kalos, known as AZ, formed a special bond with a Pokemon, a Floette. This Floette was eventually drafted into the war, forcing it to leave its one friend and home behind. The king was racked with all kinds of feelings of fear and anxiety of not knowing when and if his Pokemon would return. One day his worst fears were realized and he was handed a tiny coffin containing the body of his friend. Overcome with grief, he was determined to find a way to bring his Pokemon back to life, and so he designed and built the ultimate weapon. In order for Floette to be resurrected, he needed to sacrifice the lives of thousands of other Pokemon in order to create the energy he needed, reasoning that if he couldn't be happy and be with his friend, the lives of other people and Pokemon were insignificant and no longer mattered. So the king succeeded in firing the weapon and bringing his Floette back to life and somehow making it immortal in the process. However, Floette learned exactly what lengths AZ went to in order to bring it back to life, promptly abandoning him for eternity. While this story eventually does have a happy ending, it managed to showcase just how badly people can be overcome by grief, and how people can become so ruled by their emotions that they end up doing all kinds of terrible things to both the world and other people. While AZ may be a sympathetic character throughout the game and this story, his actions are still unforgivable atrocities whose consequences he'll be living with for the rest of his life, regardless of how long that will be. Although, given from what we know from the game, that'll probably be for quite a long time. To put just how bad his actions were into perspective, remember all those stones on and around the routes leading to Goosehenge Town? Well, they are said to be the remains of Pokemon killed when the ultimate weapon was used for the first time. And that is a lot of stones. Can you imagine just how powerful that weapon was? Almost makes me glad that it's fictional. Okay, how many people are going to give me flack for placing this higher than the Strange House? Actually, what am I saying? This is my video. I make the rules around here. Anyways, number 3 is the Ghost House of the Sinnoh region, and the one place that was the bane of 12-year-old me's experience with Pokemon Diamond, the old Chateau. Let me tell you, when Pokemon wants to do a haunted house, they don't give us the Super Mario World style spooky house with ghouls that look almost like cheap Halloween decorations. Oh no. They pull out all the stops to ensure that your stay in these places is pants-wearingly terrifying as possible and still keep that goddamn E rating. For a start, it's an abandoned mansion located in the middle of a dense forest. If experience has told me anything, it's that nothing good can come out of entering places like that, so I suggest staying far away from here if you can help it. But, like the lemon you are, you decide to enter and explore because just how bad can it be, right? From the moment you enter, you realize just how bad of an idea this was. You get an unsettling feeling that something is watching you from the shadows, and what the hell is up with that dreary music? When exploring the rest of the house, you discover a few other creepy highlights, such as the statues that appear to glare at you when you interact with them, the painting with glowing eyes that always appears to be looking at you but appears to disappear when you get too close, the TV that houses the Pokemon Rotom, and we can't forget about the ghosts that roam the halls. Unlike the ghosts in the Strange House, these ghosts are completely optional encounters and will only appear at specific times linked to the internal clock of the system. So you're not exactly guaranteed to find them. Should you find them, they'll most likely come as a complete surprise, and it's sort of unnerving how they just appear and disappear without any prior warning. So, yet again, we have something that players will inadvertently stumble across without any sort of prior warning. Pretty disturbing little Easter egg if you ask me. Oh look, another entry from the Sinnoh games! Well, this place was pretty much guaranteed to be on the list. The Distortion World. This alternate dimension from Pokemon Platinum is the home of Giratina, the legendary Pokemon of Shadows and Antimatter, and honestly looks like something out of an MC Escher painting and fits the description of the Eldritch location trope almost flawlessly. The entire dimension is made of pieces of land floating in infinite dark void, and it's a place where time does not flow, spatial relations are irregular, and the laws of physics don't apply. Waterfalls flow backwards, gravity is completely screwed up, allowing you to walk up vertical and upside down platforms, and surf along the aforementioned waterfalls. Platforms regularly appear and disappear as you progress, and these weird seaweed-like trees that either spring up from the ground to impede your progress, or shrink down into the ground allowing you to pass. Almost seems like the very dimension itself is bending itself to your will. But how is that possible? Maybe it's not the player doing it, but rather the Pokemon Giratina. Makes sense, this place is its home after all, but that would mean that Giratina is allowing the player to get closer to it? But this begs the question as to why Giratina is doing this. Is it allowing you to catch it? Or is it toying with you? The strange thing about this world is its supposed origin, as theorized by both the Sinnoh champion Cynthia and Team Galactic leader Cyrus. The distortion world was created by Giratina as a balance for the real world, and it's entirely possible that the fragments of land that make up this dimension were torn from our world by Giratina a long time ago, in an attempt to add more substance to this place. You know, I think that was the original angle Nintendo were trying to take with this place, considering how its alternate name is the Torn World. Well, it's pretty obvious to what the number one entry is at this point, so let's not waste any more time, shall we? Okay, how many people honestly saw this one coming? Out of everything dark, disturbing, and creepy, the only thing out of the entire Pokemon franchise deserving of the number one entry is the King of the Distortion World, the Pokemon equivalent to the devil himself, the one and only Giratina. This thing is probably one of the only two Pokemon in the entire franchise that can be considered to be actually malevolent, if its designs are anything to go by. Its altered form looks like a cross between a demon, a dragon, and a centipede, and its origin form takes inspiration from Gorgons and Basilisks from Greek mythology. My first experience with this Pokemon honestly scared the crap out of me as a kid. After finally beating Lysander Elite 4, a task that took me 3 months of solid grinding, 15 rare candies, and a borrowed level 100 Torterra from a family member, I noticed that a few new areas had opened up on the map, 2 being the Spring Path and Send Off Spring. When I arrived, I was feeling really creeped out and unsettled by the whole place. The map describes it as the 4th lake of Sinnoh that was kept a secret, and that beneath the surface is a cave where dimensions are distorted. And of course, we have the same creepy music from the old Chateau playing in the background. When I traversed into the cave, known as Turnback Cave, there's a name that sounds inviting, I found cryptic notes all over the place telling me to pass pillars to find a sleeping something, and that this cave was a place where dimensions overlap. After finally making my way to the centre, I discovered this eldritch abomination of a Pokemon waiting for me. Normally my reaction to stumbling across a one-of-a-kind Pokemon would be something like, holy shit, I want to catch this thing. But here, my reaction was something along the lines of, what the holy shit is that thing? Fast forward a few years to my first playthrough of Pokemon Platinum, and I already knew that Giratina was part of the main story, so I partly knew what I was getting myself into. However, nothing could prepare me for Giratina's grand entrance. Remember how I said that Giratina shows up at the last second to interrupt Cyrus's plans? What happens is that a shadow appears behind Cyrus, which then morphs into the silhouette of Giratina's head and wings, looking like something from Amnesia in the process, and proceeds to forcibly drag Cyrus into the distortion world with imagery reminiscent of the devil dragging condemned souls down to hell. The comparisons to the devil are even more apparent when we look at the Pokédex entries for this thing, as we learn that it was banished to the distortion world as punishment for violent acts it committed ages before, forcing it to gaze on the old world from a world of endless shadows. This game also explains why Turnback Cave has its mysterious properties, like the room layout being randomized every time you enter. As it turns out, it houses another portal to the distortion world, meaning that Giratina's power is warping the surrounding area. This is immediately followed by you learning that the cave is also said to be the place where the spirits of the departed pass over to the other side. God, why would anyone think that this demonic entity honestly belongs in a cute series like Pokemon? This is a cyber engineer, and Giratina is the pinnacle of the disturbing content in the Pokemon series, blowing all of the contenders out the water. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.